There are mornings when you wake up with a heavy feeling without understanding why. Everything outside still seems normal. The city still wakes up to the sound of traffic. Sunlight still slips through the window. Your phone is still filled with familiar notifications, and life continues the way it always has. But deep inside, there is a quiet darkness slowly growing. No one sees it. No one hears it. Sometimes even you do not realize it yourself. That is the moment when the mind begins planting the very first seeds for its own future. The future does not suddenly appear one day. It does not fall from the sky like a gift or a punishment. It is formed very slowly, very quietly, from the way you think today. Every thought is like a drop of water falling into the lake of the mind. One drop creates nothing significant, but thousands of drops, day after day, create a current that directs your entire life. The frightening thing is that most people do not realize they are living inside old, negative, and limiting thoughts. They wake up with worrying. They walk with doubt. They look at life through the eyes of disappointment. And then they wonder why their future never changes. A person who constantly thinks they are not good enough will gradually live as if they truly have no value. A person who constantly fears failure will begin avoiding every opportunity that could change their life. A person who always believes the world is against them will see hostility everywhere. The outside world eventually only reflects what is happening inside. That is why two people can stand in the same storm, but one sees the end while the other sees an opportunity for rebirth. The world does not change first. The mind changes first. There is a truth that very few people are quiet enough to realize. Thoughts are not just fleeting sounds in your head. They are energy shaping the way you feel, act, and choose every single day. Every repeated negative thought is like building another invisible wall around yourself. At first, that wall is very small, but over time, it becomes a prison. And the saddest part is that many people live their entire lives inside that prison without ever realizing the key has always been within their own mind. You do not become strong on the day everything becomes perfect. You become strong on the day you begin speaking to yourself differently, on the day you stop cursing yourself for old mistakes, on the day you see your own value, even when no one else recognizes it, on the day you decide that the past no longer has the right to control the future. That is the moment life begins to shift, even if nothing outside has changed yet. So many people spend hours trying to change their appearance, their job, their circumstances, or the people around them, yet they have never spent time observing their own mind. They do not realize that a thought repeated long enough becomes a belief repeated long enough becomes a personality, and personality eventually creates destiny. No one accidentally becomes the person they will be in the future. Every person is quietly creating their future self through the way they think in the present. If today you constantly think about lack, tomorrow you will live with the feeling of never having enough. If today you constantly think that you cannot change, your future will slowly freeze in stagnation. But if today, even just once, you begin believing that you deserve peace, that life still holds hope, that your heart is still capable of healing, then a new door has already begun to open. Not tomorrow, not next year, but in the very moment that thought appears. People often underestimate the power of small things. One positive thought does not instantly change your life, but it changes the way you step into a new day. It changes the way you look at yourself. It changes the way you respond to suffering, and then each small change begins creating a completely different person. Just as a tree does not grow overnight, your future does not change after a single thought. But every forest begins from one seed. Perhaps you have gone through years filled with pain. Perhaps someone once made you believe you were worthless. Perhaps life exhausted you to the point where you no longer wanted to hope. But remember this: the past only has power when you continue carrying it into the thoughts of the present. The moment you stop feeding the darkness, the light finally has a chance to enter. The mind is like soil. If you do not intentionally plant good seeds, weeds will grow on their own. Fear will grow, doubt will grow, negative voices will grow, and one day you will feel your life covered by things you never wanted. Not because you are bad, not because you failed, but because you allowed the garden of your mind to be controlled by unconscious winds for too long. The most beautiful thing is this: you can always begin again, no matter what you thought yesterday. No matter how deeply you once sank into despair, today can still be the first day of a different future. All it takes is one new thought, one new belief, one new perspective, and from there your entire life can turn in a completely different direction. Because in the end, your life is not determined by what happened to you. It is determined by the meaning your mind gives to those experiences. Two people can go through the same pain, but one uses it to awaken, while the other uses it to imprison themselves forever. The difference always begins with thought, and perhaps at this very moment, as you are listening to these words, a new future is quietly being born inside you, not loudly, not hurriedly, just a very small movement within the mind. But sometimes those tiny movements are powerful enough to change the entire direction of a person's life. There is something strange about life that many people only realize when they have almost passed through all their youth. People are not destroyed by one major event in a single day, but worn down by small thoughts repeated every day. No one wakes up in the morning and instantly becomes a hopeless person, but little by little, through moments of self-doubt, through thinking they are not good enough, not lucky enough, not worthy enough, they gradually lose the light inside themselves without even realizing it. The human mind is like water flowing quietly beneath the ground. You do not see it, but it is silently shaping everything above the surface. One positive thought can become the strength that lifts you up after your darkest days. But one negative thought repeated over time can also cause you to destroy yourself, even when life outside still contains many good things. There are people who live with material abundance, but whose souls are always restless. There are people who are successful, but have never truly been happy. And there are also people who have gone through great suffering yet still keep peaceful eyes. The difference does not lie in how life treated them. The difference lies in the way they think about life. You must understand that thoughts do not only create emotions, thoughts also create actions, and actions repeated every day create destiny. A person who always thinks they will fail often does not dare to move forward. They delay opportunities. They fear rejection. They withdraw from the world. In the end, the fear inside their mind creates the very life they were most worried about, not because the universe is against them, but because they have silently been against themselves from within. There are people who carry a negative inner dialogue for many years without even realizing it. They blame themselves for old mistakes. They live haunted by the past. They compare themselves to others, until they forget their own value, and then every day that passes, they continue planting the seeds of exhaustion, anxiety, and despair. The sad thing is that many people think those are just normal thoughts, but no, what you repeatedly tell yourself in your mind will eventually become your emotional reality. If every day you wake up thinking that life is too difficult, your mind will begin searching for evidence of that everywhere. You will only see pressure, disappointment, and pain. But if you begin the day with the thought that no matter how difficult life becomes, you can still grow from it, you will begin to see opportunities you once overlooked. The mind is like a mirror. It reflects whatever you continuously focus on. Many people wait for something big to happen in order to change their lives. They think that if they only had more money, a better relationship, or a better opportunity, they would finally be happy. But the truth is that if the mind does not change, new circumstances will quickly become another form of suffering. A person filled with anxiety will continue feeling anxious even when things improve. A person who always feels lacking will never feel enough, no matter how much they possess. That is why the future does not begin by changing the outside world. It begins by changing the inner world. Perhaps the hardest part of growing up is not fighting the world, but learning how to overcome the negative voices within yourself, the voices that constantly whisper that you cannot do it, that you are too late, that you are not good enough, that others are better than you. Those voices do not appear to protect you. They appear because you have fed them for too long with fear and unhealed pain. But look deeply into the lives of people who have overcome adversity. You will notice one thing they all have in common. They do not allow circumstances to determine their thoughts. Even in darkness, they still hold on to a small belief that light exists somewhere ahead. That belief is what helps them keep walking when everything seems to have collapsed. Not everyone who is strong has never fallen apart. They are simply people who have learned how to stand up again with a different mind. You cannot control everything that happens in life, but you can always control the way you think about it. Under the same rain, one person complains about the gloomy sky, while another feels the gentleness of nature. Facing the same failure, one person sees it as the end, while another sees it as a lesson for growth. Life is not only created by the events that happen to you, but also by the way your mind interprets those events. There will be days when you feel exhausted. There will be nights when you lie silently in the dark and wonder whether you will ever truly be okay. But even in those moments, what you say to yourself still matters deeply. Do not turn your mind into the cruelest place in the world. Do not hurt yourself with judgments you would never say to a friend who is suffering. Learn to treat yourself with the same gentleness you always give to others. Because healing does not begin when life becomes perfect. Healing begins when you change the way you see yourself, when you stop calling yourself a failure just because things have not happened the way you wanted, when you understand that you are still learning, still growing, and still worthy of love even on your weakest days. Every thought today is like a letter sent to the future. If you continuously send fear, the future will be filled with anxiety. If you send hope, gratitude, and trust, the future will gradually open in a different way. Miracles do not happen overnight, but every small thought is quietly leading you toward the future version of yourself. Imagine if every day you spent a few minutes nurturing good thoughts, not unrealistic fantasies, but thoughts that make your soul feel lighter, that you still have opportunities, that you can still change. that the past does not define your entire being, that inside you there is still a light that has never disappeared. If those thoughts are repeated long enough, you will begin to feel different, more peaceful, stronger, gentler with life. And then one day, you will look back at your past self and realize your future did not change at the moment you earned more money or received more recognition from others. It changed from the day you began thinking differently about yourself and life. Because everything in this life begins from within, and a peaceful future also begins with one small thought filled with light inside your mind today. And one day you will understand that life does not truly change when you have more, but when your mind becomes more peaceful. Not every wound disappears. Not every hardship stops appearing. But the way you walk through them will be different. You no longer look at yourself with eyes full of disappointment like before. You no longer wake up every morning feeling like you are fighting against the entire world. And you no longer allow negative thoughts to control your whole life. Because after all, what shapes the future is not what happens to you, but what happens inside your mind every single day. There are people who spend their entire lives in fear without ever truly living. They are always waiting for a perfect moment to begin changing, waiting until they become stronger, waiting until they have enough money, waiting until they are loved, waiting until life becomes easier. But time quietly continues passing, and then they realize the most painful truth. Life does not stop and wait for anyone to finish healing before it continues. If you keep thinking that you cannot do it, you will remain standing still in front of the door of life forever. If you continue believing that you are not worthy of happiness, you will unconsciously reject every good thing that comes to you. And if you keep holding on to old thoughts filled with pain, your future will only become an extended version of today's wounds. But the beautiful thing is that the human mind is not something fixed forever. You can learn to think differently. You can learn to look at life with gentler eyes. You can begin again, even if you have been lost for a very long time. No one is ever too late to change their life from within. Perhaps today you are still exhausted. Perhaps you are still carrying pain inside that you cannot even name yet. Perhaps there are nights when you feel lonely among millions of people out there. But please do not forget that even the darkest sky cannot stop the sun from rising the next morning. And even a soul once filled with darkness can learn again how to turn toward the light. You do not need to become a perfect person to begin the journey of change. You only need to start paying attention to what you are thinking every day, because every thought is creating a path. When you constantly think about failure, you are walking on the road that leads to fear. When you constantly think about hope, you are opening the road to healing. Do not underestimate the power of one small positive thought. A good thought may not change everything immediately, but it can save you from collapsing during your darkest days. It can give you a reason to keep walking for one more day. And sometimes, simply continuing to walk means life has already begun to change. There is a truth that many people only realize after years of being lost. The thing that caused them the most suffering was not life itself, but the way they looked at life. They carried fear from the past into the present. They allowed old failures to determine their self-worth. They saw themselves through the judgmental eyes of others until they forgot who they truly were. But you were not born to live forever in self-doubt. You were not born to fight against yourself in your own mind every single day. You were not born merely to exist in anxiety, pressure, and endless negative thoughts. Deep inside you, there has always been a part that never gave up hope, a part that quietly longs to live more peacefully, to heal, to be free from the invisible chains of fear. And perhaps the most important moment in life is not when you achieve something great, but when you realize that you have the right to choose the way you think. You have the right to stop hurting yourself with negative words inside your head. You have the right to let go of the beliefs that have caused you pain for far too long. You have the right to begin building a different future from your own mind today. Remember that every day is a doorway, and your thoughts are the very thing that determines whether you step into the light or remain in the darkness. No one can live your life for you. No one can think for you. In the end, the person creating your future has always been you. One day, you will look back on your journey and realize that every great change began with very small things. One gentler thought toward yourself. One moment of forgiving the past. One moment when you chose hope instead of despair. One day when you decided to stop allowing fear to control your life. And then you will understand that the future is not something far away waiting ahead. The future is being created right in this very moment, in the way you think, in the way you see yourself, in the way you face life today. If this video touched your heart, leave a comment about the thoughts you want to change starting today. Sometimes just one sincere sharing can become a light for someone quietly walking through darkness. And if you want to continue walking together on the journey of healing, awakening, and rediscovering inner peace, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next videos, because perhaps what you have been searching for all this time is not in the outside world, but waiting to be awakened within your own mind.